Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the March 6, 2019 meeting of the City of Newport News Planning Commission. The chair recognizes Commissioner Gross.
The Newport News Planning Commission is mandated by state law, and its members are appointed by City Council. Section 15.2, TAC 2210 of the Code of Virginia states, in part, that every locality shall create a planning commission in order to promote the orderly development of the locality and its environment. The statutory purpose is to improve the public health, safety, convenience, and welfare of the citizens and to plan the future development of the communities. In serving this statutory purpose, the Commission invites the comments at the public hearing of its interested citizens of matters before it and welcomes your presence. Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the agenda before us.
Second.
It has been properly moved and second that we adopt the agenda before us. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We will now have our invocation by Commissioner.
Maybe Commissioner Carpenter would be happy to do it.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for the many blessings of our lives, including and especially our families, our friends, and our health. And on this day, we ask that you provide us with wisdom and courage and strength to do the right thing, to lead this city in terms of its appropriate growth and development. I ask for this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We're now, I trust that all the commissioners had an opportunity to review the minutes of the February 6, 2019 public hearing and the minutes from the February 20th, 2019 work session. If there are no additions, corrections, or deletions of the minutes, they will stand as printed. Any corrections, deletions? Thank you. I will now move to the public hearing portion of our meeting. Our first item on the agenda is CU 2018-0010 North Riverside Baptist Church.
It's been withdrawn.
Yes. This particular CU was withdrawn and deferred from our February 6th meeting, and there was a deferral letter that was given to us as commissioners, and I will read that for us. And it states, Dear Ms. Charos, North Riverside Baptist Church recently submitted an application for a conditional use permit on behalf of our tenant, City Life Church. We would like to withdraw the CUP application from consideration. We thank you for your help and guidance as we will be resubmitting an application which better reflects our needs and circumstance. Sincerely, Pastor Johnson. And this will be on file for all the commissioners if you would want to have any questions at that time. I just do my agenda. Too much. Sorry. Moving to our next case. Our next item is a change of zoning, CZ 2019-001, Land Lovers LLC, which will be presented by Mr. Saul. How are you, sir?
Good afternoon. So we have application CZ 2019-001. Landlovers LLC is the applicant and the owner. The application is for a change of zoning from C1 retail commercial to R5 low-density multiple family dwelling with proffers. The 1.43 acre property is located at 14307 Old Courthouse Way. North of the property are the Nichols Apartments and the Wedgewood condominiums on property zone C1 retail commercial, and the Courthouse States condominiums on property zone R7 medium density multiple family dwelling. East, we have apartments on property zone C1 retail commercial. South, we have more apartments on property zone C1 retail commercial. And finally, west of the property, adjacent to it, we have the Pear Ridge single-family attached homes on property zone R5 low-density multiple family dwelling. The One City, One Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan land use map identifies medium-density residential uses for the property. The proposed change of zoning is consistent with this recommendation. The property has been zoned C1 retail commercial since the citywide comprehensive rezoning became effective August 1st, 1997. Prior to that, the property was zoned C2 retail commercial, which at the time permitted residential uses. That explains all the apartments around it on C1. On June 18, 1985, the Board of Zoning Appeals approved a special exception to allow for a planned residential development, or PRD, on the 6.4 acre abutting to the west of the property. On June 25, 1985, City Council approved the rezoning of the parcel from R1B single-family dwelling and R2C multiple family dwelling to R2A townhouse dwelling to permit the development of the Pear Ridge PRD. That designation was replaced with the equivalent R5 low-density multiple family dwelling zoning as part of the 1997 citywide rezoning. On April 24th, 2007, City Council approved change of zoning CZ 07232 from C1 retail commercial to R7 medium density multiple family dwelling with proffers for the property at 14256 Old Courthouse Way, located across the street to the north of the property, known today as the Courthouse States condominiums. A change of zoning from C1 retail commercial to R5 low density multiple family dwelling with proffers is being requested to allow for the redevelopment of the site for single-family attached residential uses. Section 453405 of the zoning ordinance permits a property owner to offer proffers at the time of application for a change of zoning. If accepted by City Council, these proffers will govern the development and use of the property. The ordinance requires a minimum width and side frontage of 70 feet and a minimum depth of 110 feet for lots for two-family dwellings. The conceptual site plan indicates a 5-lot, two-family development. All 5 lots exceed ordinance requirements. The site regulations require that a landscape street be located along all street frontages and that it be no less than 10% of the existing right-of-way width, which in this case is 10 foot. So a 10-foot landscape strip is required along both Old Courthouse Way as well as Wells Road. Both are shown in the conceptual landscape plan. And finally, stormwater quantity and quality issues have been partially addressed in the Phase 1 environmental site assessment and conceptual site plan. These will be fully developed in detail for submission of a site plan. The proposed change of zoning is being requested, as I said, to allow for the redevelopment of a 1.43-acre parcel that includes an abandoned single-family residential structure that is adjacent to other residential uses. The proposed development will introduce new residential for sale units in an area that has not seen any developments since the 2007 construction of the Courthouse Estates condominiums. The proposed development provides a new type of housing product with more open green space than previous residential developments in the surrounding area. The proposed change of zoning from C1 retail commercial to R5 low-density multiple-family dwelling with proffers is in keeping with the adjacent residential uses. The property is better suited for development as residential than commercial due to its location adjacent to other residential uses and lack of visibility from Warwick Boulevard. The applicant has voluntarily provided 4 proffers. The proffers address the overall development, which include design, landscaping, as well as limiting the development to only 10 units. The proposed change of zoning and proffers provide the opportunity for a redevelopment that will improve the appearance of this area with new structures and the use of shared driveways that reduce the need for curb cuts. This allows for better and more extensive landscaping, as well as the addition of sidewalks on both Old Courthouse Way and Wells Road. In conclusion, the proposed change of zoning is consistent with the One City, One Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan land use map. The proposed proffers will improve the property's visual impact by providing abundant landscaping and quality materials for the proposed buildings. The proffers also limit the total unit count to no more than 10 units. Hence, it is recommended that the City Planning Commission recommend to City Council approval of change of zoning ZZ 2019-0001 for the approximately 1.43 acre property located at 14307 Old Courthouse Way from C1 Retail Commercial to R5 Low-Density Multiple Family Dwelling with proffers. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Saul. Yes, I'm sure that we do have questions. Ms. Commissioner Fox?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was wondering, it says they're going to save some of the existing trees, which I think is very commendable. However, there is a large magnolia tree that I believe fronts on Old Courthouse Way, and I guess it is not one of the trees they can save.
Not sure if that is one of the trees that will be safe or not.
And I know if they can save it, they can save it.
Yes.
If they can't, they can't, but I hope they can. But I did wonder, the driveways are all on Old Courthouse Way. Is that correct?
There are two on the other side.
It's two on the other
Okay.
side, on Wells.
It looks, what I'm looking at though, it looks like, there are trees in front of all the driveways. Am I looking at that incorrectly?
What is the question again?
Yeah. Okay, I'm incorrect, never mind.
Okay.
So, the sidewalks, are they tying into existing sidewalks, once these new ones are built? Because I don't recall seeing.
There are no sidewalks.
That's what I thought. I just want to make sure.
Currently in that area.
So this will be the only section with sidewalks in front of it?
Correct.
On that street?
Correct.
And so with that said, we do have, a storm sewer drainage that's gonna be installed at one of the ending, north end of the property, if I'm looking at this correct, that's correct. I'm sorry, at the south end of the property. Any special plans for that other than, I know that the stormwater configuration is going to be discussed later, but I just wanted to have an understanding how that was going to tie in with the sidewalks.
Correct. The engineering department has had the opportunity to review preliminary plans, and they think that this will be in keeping with what they have planned, and it will serve the houses well, and it will meet their requirements. And that will be reviewed in detail at site plan.
So, just wanted to be concerned about any adjacent properties for water flow, and it's ensuring that we are going to do something here with this BMP that doesn't cause any issues.
It is not supposed to cause any issues. It's supposed to actually alleviate any issues that are that they are having right now.
Any other questions?
Yes.
There's a minor, on the same things that have already been discussed, but just a couple other questions. The mention of the trees, I see the trees are in the yards, but my experience on Old Courthouse Way is that whenever Warwick Boulevard is backed up, it runs parallel to Warwick Boulevard, and there is a lot of traffic that'll go through there. And I don't know what size trees these are, but for people coming in and out of their driveways, to have a tree in the front yard, I'm concerned that the vegetation is going to limit their ability to see what's coming down the road. Is there a reason they have to have a tree in the front yard?
Yes, but transportation has looked at the location of the trees, and if you look really close, the visibility when you are off the tree and before you get to the road, you have ample visibility of the road, so that shouldn't cause any problems.
Okay. And then the size of the sidewalk, is it going to be just the 3-foot wide sidewalk, or is it going to be a wider sidewalk
I
that
think-
can then be used by bicycles as well when everything gets finished up?
I
To plan ahead
I
for
think
alternate modes?
it is.
It is the wider? Yeah, I
Yes.
can't see that. No, I can't see. Okay, okay. And then, the BMP that we were talking about, you know, the concern I had with that was whether it was gonna be wet or dry normally. And
And-
you weren't able to tell me the other day when I asked you about it.
It is supposed to be damp, but it's going to be planted, so it's not going to be wet.
So it's not like a little pond?
No.
Okay, because
It's
then I
not.
was concerned about, you know, having a swimming pool in the backyard open for everybody's child
Yes.
to fall into on the way down the street. But, okay, yeah, personally, I prefer the dry ones. So, okay, thank you.
And this has been, it will be approved finally by engineering, right?
Of course, yes.
Any other questions?
Hey, I've got one. So the request is to change the zoning from C1 to R5, low-density multifamily. The comp plan states it recommends medium-density residential. So they are not maxing out the number of
Correct.
residential units,
They
correct?
could have gone a lot higher.
They could have gone to how high? I mean, just ballpark number. I mean, 15, 16?
Is what, 15 units per acre?
Oh, so if they could have maxed that out, it would have been over like 20, correct?
Correct,
1.4 times 15, remember?
yes.
Okay, all right, that's what I needed, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Saul. Having several cards on this matter, I noticed that the cards are for questionings only. Any questions? I now open the public hearing section. Having several cards on this matter, the chair reminds the audience that during this public comments, limit to 5 minutes if we have any questions. So if no questions, no need to read the cards. All right. So I now close the public hearing session on this application. This matter is now before the commissioners.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Yes.
Chair recognized.
I have
Commissioner
to
Mulvaney.
say that, you know, we recently are in the middle of a process, middle of a study for this Denby area, and there hasn't been a revitalization or any new development in this area for quite a long time. So when this came across, I was very excited to see what's occurring up there and the fact that we're gonna have, you know, this new revitalization of this area of a lot that's basically not doing anything. So I think it falls right in line with what the city's plan is, as well as with the Denby Work Association and what everybody wants to see in that area. So I'm fully in favor of what they're proposing here.
Thank you, Commissioner Mulvaney. And as Commissioner Fox said, is that a motion? But I'll take a moment to piggyback on you. Yes, having had no recent development in homes in the area, I think this is a great use for this property, and I would like to at least thank the developer and wish them very well on this particular project. This is a great little project for this community. Commissioner Fox?
I would like to make a motion
Thank you.
that we recommend approval of change of zoning application number CZ-2019-0001, Land Lovers LLC. This is a really nice project at a very, very blighted setting with that house falling down, and hopefully that magnolia tree will reign forever.
Second.
Second?
I didn't have a motion, but I had a second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and properly second. Melissa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fox?
4.
Commissioner Mulvaney?
4.
Commissioner Carpenter?
4.
Commissioner Stodgel?
4.
Commissioner Whitcamp?
4.
Commissioner Willis?
4.
Commissioner Gross?
4.
Commissioner Simmons?
4.
Motion unanimous, 8-0.
Okay. This case will be heard by City Council on March 26, 2019. Thank you, Commissioners. Next, we still have another presentation by Saul. This is for conditional use permit CU 2019-001 for the Mariners Museum.
Hello again. So application CU 2019-0001 is by the Mariners Museum is the owner, and PI Tower Development LLC is the applicant. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit for the installation and operation of a communication tower greater than 50 feet in height. The tower will be located at 100 Museum Drive. The tower will occupy 2,500 square feet lease area of a 463.9 acre parcel. The lease area, if you can see it there, is directly adjacent to the open storage area behind the museum buildings. The Mariners Museum property is surrounded by single-family residential structures on properties zoned R2, R3, and R4 single-family dwelling. However, the lease area is contained within the larger parcel and not directly adjacent to these uses. Immediately adjacent to the lease area are the Mariners Museum open storage, as well as the Mariners Museum Park on property zone P1 Park. The One City, One Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan Land Use Map designates the property for parks and recreation uses. Given that the tower will provide a needed service to the public and the location within a service area of the park, it conforms to the land use designation. The property has been zoned P1 Park since August 1st, 1997, when the city-wide comprehensive rezoning became effective. Section 45523 of the zoning ordinance provides minimum standards for communication towers in the city. Towers that meet these standards are permitted in the P1 Park zoning district with the approval of a conditional use permit. Proposed towers are required to provide the ability for co-location, which this one does. A minimum setback of 25 feet from the rear and side property lines, as well as a minimum of 100 feet from any public right-of-way are required. I think it's evident from the location that these are met. The applicant has provided a conceptual landscape plan that shows the required row of evergreen trees surrounding the compound in front of a proposed chain link fence. Commenting city departments had no objection to this request. T-Mobile, who will be the anchor provider on the proposed tower, has experienced a gap in coverage in this area of the city. The new tower will allow T-Mobile and other service providers to address coverage and capacity issues by connecting to the propagation rings of surrounding towers. The zoning ordinance requires that wireless providers secure co-location opportunities before building new towers. There are no towers available in the area that would allow co-location. There are also no buildings that are tall enough to meet coverage objectives. It was determined that there are no other towers within the needed search ring. The applicant proposes to construct and operate a 175 monopole communication tower, which includes a 5-foot lightning rod. The associated ground equipment will be within the 50 by 50 fenced leased area that will be appropriately screened by new and existing vegetation. The proposed location is within an area of the museum that is not readily available to the public and abuts the outdoor storage yard of the museum. However, visual impacts from the tower will encroach on an otherwise pristine natural vista from Lake Maury Natural Area and other areas surrounding it. By lowering the height of the tower to no more than 150 feet, the visual intrusion will be greatly diminished, preserving and protecting the view shed. Further, 150 feet allows for collocation of up to 3 users and has been a standard maximum height with approval of a conditional use permit in the city. To achieve this, a condition that limits the height of the tower to no more than 150 feet is being recommended. In conclusion, given that the tower will provide a needed service to the public and its location within a service area of the park, it conforms to the land use designation in the One City, One Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The construction of a 175-feet communication tower will encroach in the natural view shed. However, a reduction of the height to 150 feet will minimize the visual impact of the tower, making it more compatible with the surrounding uses. Hence, it is recommended that you recommend approval of conditional use permit CU 2019-001 to allow for the installation and operation of a communication tower greater than 50 feet in height in a 2,500 square feet lease area at 100 Museum Drive with the following 14 conditions that include: the height of the communication tower shall not exceed 150 feet. All equipment and materials shall be limited to within the 2,500 square foot enclosed lease area. The landscape plan shall be largely in conformance with the plan provided, and the landscaping will be within the leased area. All other standard conditions for communication towers also apply. All 14 conditions are detailed in the staff report and will be part of the ordinance approved by council. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for someone? Starting with Commissioner Fox?
Go ahead.
We are approving or recommending approval of a communication tower. And it doesn't differentiate between a monopole or a stealth tower. In that setting, has there been any discussion about a stealth tower?
There have been no discussions. We asked about it. It looks like that is not the type of tower that would be, that could collocate all 3 providers in an efficient way.
You have the ones now that are the trees that have lots of different co-locators.
Yeah, the trees tend to call more attention to themselves than just the regular towers that tend to blend more with the sky and not call so much attention to the plastic branches, and which tend to look a little bit silly, especially during the winter.
Well, I kind of like them. But
Okay, good question. Commissioner Mulvaney?
Well, I'm going to follow on to what she said, because I completely disagree. Because I've traveled this country and I've seen the camouflage disguised towers that don't look, I mean, they've really come through in some modules that truly look authentic, including the one that's the flagpole on 64, right down, you know, right along the side of the road as you're coming through the tunnel. I mean, it's a flagpole and you have no idea that it's a tower. So the question is, one, I'd love to see it disguised because this is a very pristine area of the city. I mean, it's unbelievable. And putting a landscape plan out in this wilderness area makes no sense. It seems like we're spending money on landscape that's unnecessary because we're not going to see that portion of it because it's encapsulated inside the wilderness. But who came up with 150 feet? Why couldn't it be 125? Why couldn't it be, you know, the heights of the trees there are not so encompassing. The 150 is going to tower over the trees. Where did the 150 from 175 come from that it couldn't go down to 125 or 110?
Yes, as discussed in the staff report, we came up with the 150 because that is what has been recommended in the past for the towers within the urban environment of the city.
Does 150 feet require an avoidance light? Does it require an avoidance light on the top of it?
It might, and so if the airport requires it, it will have to have it.
So we don't know that yet.
It might or it will.
It might.
At
Yeah.
this point, we do not know. That the airport would have to, we would send any plans to them and they would comment. At this point, they have not commented that it would need a light.
So if we exceed the 150, from my understanding, and go to 175, we should.
We wouldn't know until we get back
Yeah.
something from them. We have not received anything at this point.
Has the airport made any comments of when they would make a comment based upon what we're going to decide?
Not at this time. They would have to do something prior to approval of site plan, essentially.
So the airport hasn't been notified as of yet.
I think we did, didn't we? Yes.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
just have not
did.
received back.
We just not
Correct,
received-
we just
Yes,
have not
there are
received
no
any comments from them. So in other words, they have not made a comment that it would or would not. At site plan, they must comment.
Right.
There's a difference.
So my other question was, you mentioned that this was being erected for T-Mobile, and at some point, they could have 2 more modules on there. And the comprehensive plan denotes that communication throughout the city is an important component to be able to move forward.
Absolutely.
However, we're narrowing it down to T-Mobile for this one area because there is a gap in coverage. So we're only following the comprehensive plan for a single carrier in the hope that we'll put 2 other carriers that basically eliminates this communication gap in this area around the park or the museum.
It is a tower that will be able to accommodate at least 3 carriers.
Right.
What they are proposing will accommodate 4.
But what we're asking for will accommodate 3 because we're
Yes.
lowering it down to 150. So once again, I go back to, what if we lowered it down to 125, which then reduced the visible, if we're not gonna camouflage it, the pollution, the sightline pollution come down to 125. What is the maximum height that would be acceptable to get the communication?
That's,
I think that is a question for the applicant.
Okay.
Saul, do you know what the sort of average tree height is in that area? This rendering that you show, the tower's at 170. If we brought it down, so we sort of hit the average tree height?
It would be still a little bit over those trees.
yeah, they would. It would, at 125, you would still see it above the tree canopies. That's part of the problem with some of the stealth or tree-like, and it's a matter of opinion. So I'm not going to agree or disagree. I'm just stating that some people think those look wonderful. Some people think they look not so great because you can see through the branches and you can see all of the equipment attached to the tower in addition to these branches, and no tree grows that tall or that shape. I don't care what it is. So that the natural environment is different than any kind of a tower that you're going to put up. At the same time, at 150 feet, we felt and still believe that what you will see is the very top of the tower above the tree line, and it will tend to blend in better with all of the branches that surround it from a distance. When you're up close, you're going to see it no matter what. I'm not going to tell you you won't, but that's a given. And the screening requirement, by the way, is something that is required to cover and screen the base and all the equipment that's at the ground. Granted, this is next to a storage facility, so, you know, it's relative, but that is a code requirement. It's not something that we're adding. This is just a requirement by our city code.
I mean, I have one other question. We're showing, you know, we're seeing this rendering from Warwick Boulevard looking back. But, you know, the drive that goes up to the museum, I guess it's Museum Drive or whatever that's called, you know, all of that neighborhood's sort of there. They're closer.
Yes, and usually
Yeah,
the
sure.
closer you get
Really well. It's right here.
to the antenna, to the tower, the less you see it because you have the buildings right there.
I'm sorry.
The buildings kind of block your view of the tower when you're close to the tower. So it's, yes, you'll be able to see it. You have buildings around it that will kind of block your view there a little bit. But yes, it's,
Yeah.
you'll see it.
Any other questions for Saul?
I don't have a question, I do have a comment. I live relatively nearby, and I can share with you personally that this is an area with weak coverage. There's not many areas that I travel day in and day out where I actually drop calls anymore. But this is one of those areas that I definitely believe that there is a need for a new pole here. And the other thing is, pertinent or not, it's land that's owned by the Mariners Museum, and they are one of my favorite nonprofits, and I like the idea that they'll be receiving some rental income from 1, 2, or 3 of the users. Other than that, thank you very much.
And I agree with what Michael said. Obviously, we've got to have cell towers. It's like telephone poles were probably hundreds of years ago. But I don't think that we have to just settle for metal towers rising up into the sky. If there's something we can do to alleviate that impact without costing, and I don't know, it could be that that's a unreasonable cost to put up a stealth tower. But in that location, I would just love the opportunity to see what other types of towers might be available, although I recognize this is a conditional use permit, and we probably need to move forward on it with the conditions that they've agreed to. And I have to defer to one of you on that question.
And the applicant is here, you can ask the question
Okay.
from the applicant. The applicant has not agreed to our suggestion that the tower be 150. The application is still for the 175.
And with the
And
stealth
I
tower,
I should clarify, the 150 is the total height.
With
If
the-
they need to have a lightning rod, it would be included in that 150 feet.
Well, and all I'm gonna say is, to both of you, is the fact that the technology has improved so much that the stealth towers are truly not this stick trees that
Right.
you've seen before. They actually are buildings and towers and things that look like they're aesthetically pleasing to the background. We went through this when we did the one up at Fort Eustis is the fact of, one of the things that we're trying to promote the beauty and pristine nature of Newport News and how we live on the James River and how we have all these wonderful things. It makes sense to ensure that we set a standard going forward that, okay, we understand we need communication, we understand that there's gaps, but there's a way to do it that's not going to pollute our visual reference going forward, so.
Agreed. Thank commissioners for the comments, questions. I will now open the public hearing session to this, and having one card on this matter. The chair reminds the audience on his public comments are limited to 5 minutes on his comment section. When you come to the microphone podium, please, Mr. Howard Hogg? Hakey? Hakey? I have to look at the writing here. Okay, all right. How are you doing today, sir?
Great, I'm doing really well. Thank you for
Please,
the opportunity to address the commission.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for our record, please.
Yeah, my name is Howard Hagee. I'm the president and CEO of the Mariners Museum, and that is located at 100 Museum Drive, Newport News, Virginia, 23606.
Thank you. And I apologize for mentioning your name. I'm
No,
looking
it's not spelled that way, as I said. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Hagee?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Gross? Thank you.
The height of the tower was proposed to be 175 feet. What's the optimum height for full reception?
So I don't have the technical answers
Okay.
to that. I would tell you that we don't have a strong opinion. The museum doesn't have a strong opinion about the height of the tower. Obviously, we would lose one co-locator if we went from 175 to 150, which is a slight hit to the revenue for the museum. But from our perspective, it wouldn't make it undesirable then to have that cell phone
I
tower.
just hate to see them put a tower there that was too small.
So I will tell you that part of the attraction for this, from the museum perspective, is number one, the safety of park users. So in addition to some of the coverage problems that we've got, there are areas on the Nolan Trail that you would drop calls as well. And we invite people that if they're having a problem on the trail, they can call our security office and we'll respond to help them out if they've twisted an ankle or they see something that makes them nervous and things like that. So the ability to have coverage for the whole park is important to us. Also within the museum itself, we get very poor cell phone coverage, and this would increase that. And that's both a safety concern, but also a visitor enjoyment concern as well. And I live in Riverside, and our coverage isn't very good either. But so I'm just raising that to say your point about a tower that actually provides coverage is an important one from our perspective.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And I appreciate and I understand, and it's a great flow of revenue for the museum, but it's also a great flow of revenue for the providers that are on there. And I can't understand from the museum's point of view why we wouldn't consider camouflaging this, and potentially if you do that, you get the 175 foot with the 4 providers on there, and then it's equal across the board. You still get your revenue, they put a little bit more money into the tower, and the city doesn't get this monolith that's sitting up there of another, that may or may not have to be lit, of a metal structure that's just sitting out in the beautiful Mariners Museum and Nolan Trail area.
So I'll share some thoughts on that. I don't have a particularly strong opinion. It's sort of speaking for the museum. I would tell you that they during our conversations with PI Tower, they did do one of those balloon tests, and I myself got in a vehicle and drove the full circumference of the park. And you can absolutely see the tower from from Warwick, as you saw in the image there. And then you can see it over the top of the main entrance to the museum. For most other locations, the tree, you're close enough to trees, or if you're on the Nolan Trail, you're within trees, such that it's actually difficult to see. And in most cases, you can't see the tower. So it's really from those two spots. The only potential consideration with respect to a camouflage tower is that they are wider, significantly wider, to the extent that this tower will stick up above the tree top. So it will regardless of its shape or design or anything else, it's going to stand out from the other trees. That if I was in fact on the trail and were to catch a glimpse of the tower through the trees as I'm walking, if it's wider, it might be that I see it more frequently or more regularly than a narrow monopole, which is probably going to disappear in between trees. So again, I don't say that to differ with what you're saying about technology or anything else. I think it's appealing from our perspective that it would be more narrow and then would sort of disappear when you're not happen to be driving on Warwick or pulling up to the museum. And I would tell you from the main entrance of the museum, we already have a radio tower that serves our two-way radios that provide communications for our staff out in the park, our security and our grounds people. And until we did this, until we started exploring the possibility of putting a cell tower in, I would tell you I had never noticed the radio tower that's there. So I would suspect that this is going to be one of those things that if it's somewhat more discreet, it might actually be ignored by folks, as they're always going to be in transit in those two places. And I would just echo. I think maybe you raised the point about spending money on landscaping. If that's a code issue, I would understand that we might have to do that. I would tell you that this area is not viewable by the public, and so the idea of sort of masking the ground equipment is not a concern to us. And I also think that actually the landscaping outside of the compound in this particular case would eat up some of our storage area. So we and through two sides of this compound are shielded by natural vegetation. So we may not have a vote or a choice, and maybe the code compels us to put some landscaping in, but we would say it's unnecessary from our perspective.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Comments. Any other questions? Comments? Well, thank you very much. And the chair recognizes that we have received another card in this matter. The chair would like to call Mr. Jeff Holland to the podium. Please state your name and address, please.
Jeff Holland, 4435 Waterfront Drive, Suite 100, Glen Allen, Virginia, 23060. Good evening, Chairman.
Good evening.
Members of the Commission. My name is Jeff Holland, and we are consultants for PI Tower Development and T-Mobile, and we're presenting the 175-foot monopole tower cup application. First, before I get too far, I want to thank staff for their help. I want to thank Saul's patience. I know I tested it, getting him the stuff in time to make it on this agenda, so I appreciate that. As you see in your packet, we're proposing a 175-foot tower, which includes a 5-foot lightning rod in a 50 by 50 fenced-in compound area. To answer your question, Commissioner Mulvaney, we talked with T-Mobile in the past several days, and the height where this project's no longer viable would be a 150-foot tower, not including the lightning rod. So if you're looking at a 4-foot lightning rod, the total height would be 154. A 150-foot tower would put their rad center about 145. But also, if you drop the height, the future co-location spots go lower and lower, and we don't know how viable they are. So I think I wrote it down. That would put the 3 co-locations at, what is that? It's 10 feet, 135, 125, and 115. I don't know how viable those rad centers would be for for other carriers. T-Mobile and PI Tower Development are amendable to doing a monopine at 170 if you want. I know that some people like them, some people don't like them. They're also willing to do semi-flush mounted antenna, and what that is, what you see in your package is the normal 10 array, which is really wide. You see it everywhere. Semi-flush, which is a little bit different than flush mount. Flush mount is right against the tower. It's basically the tower, and you see things sticking up. Semi-flush is basically somewhere in between. I don't have the details with me. I can provide staff if needed at a later date. But they are willing to lessen that in visual intrusion from Warwick. Instead of the normal antenna array, you can shorten that with a semi-flush mounted antenna. In the staff report, we do see that staff recommended 150, which includes lightning rod. If the commission does go that way, that route, we respectfully request that it be 150, not including the lightning rod. T-Mobile has told us if we go any further lower than that, the project's not viable for them. I think that's all I have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, comments.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. Any questions? Commissioner Fox?
So I want to be clear about this. At 150, how many co-locators could you have?
You can, generally speaking, you can build a tower with 3 or 4 co-locations. We just don't know how viable they would be
Right.
at 135, 125, and 115.
So you need the 175.
The higher we go, the better coverage it is for everybody. And we were trying to determine how big those trees are, and then, you can't really determine that. But we know if we go to 150, the lower rad centers, we just don't know how viable they would be for other carriers.
I guess my concern is if we have 4 co-locators on this tower, that could eliminate the need to build an additional tower somewhere else in the area.
True.
And
But
that to me
we
seems
don't
like
know how the other carriers, if they're willing to locate at 115, 125, as opposed to if it's a 175-foot tower, you're looking at T-Mobile, we would be at 165, then 155, 145, 135.
And that would be more appealing to Verizon and AT&T.
Yes, because the higher you go, the more coverage you have.
But you don't have any agreements with them.
No.
That they will co-locate with you.
Right. This is just T-Mobile will be the anchor tenant, and we would assume other carriers would co-locate, but we don't know. We don't have any agreements.
And when you're talking about the co-locators being lower, doesn't that then drop them more clearly? The co-location is kind of the big, round, antenna-like things, is that right?
They would you'd see the antenna array.
You'd see more of that
You'd
closer
just
to
see
the
them
ground,
basically 10 feet apart.
which makes it more.
And, T-Mobile has the top rad center, so the coverage, their area they would cover would be greater than, say, a Verizon Wireless at a lower. And that's just the way,
Have
it
you
go.
all, have you installed stealth towers?
Yes. You can do monopines. There's a thing called a slick stick, which is basically looks like a smokestack, and you put everything inside. I know I personally did one for another carrier in Portsmouth, down by the waterfront. The problem with that is you have to put everything inside. Antenna have to take a couple rad centers, so
Yeah.
you have less co-locations for a slick stick.
But there are other kind of trees as well now, right?
That I don't know. I've only seen the ones I know. I actually did a co-location at the monopine at Riverview Park in Newport News.
Yeah, I live right
Those
there.
That's in my experience, that's the only thing we see in monopines.
Well, and I honestly think it's more attractive, which again, that's opinion only, than that big, tall pole. Although the pine does not look real, it looks aesthetically pleasing compared to a pole, in my opinion, which is not worth much, but I would just like to see T-Mobile get the most coverage to allow as many co-locators as possible so that we don't have another application for another 150-foot cell tower in a few years.
I think that would be possible at 175 feet.
And
as
I
we're
also
presenting
like to
tonight.
see you make it look as attractive as you can.
We
but-
can paint it some So I know some counties will, you paint the tower dark, dark Java brown seems to be a popular color in some places. Some paint it blue, some like it to leave it galvanized steel. We can do the semi-flush mount, so it's not that antenna array that you see
So you can make it look more attractive, although,
as
yeah,
a little.
yeah.
One thing I would like to point out that we ran the photo sims that you saw from Warwick Boulevard at 175. We did one at 150 with the 4-foot lightning rod, and there's not much difference in terms of what peeks out over the top of the trees from that angle. Of course, if we go lower, I know there's been discussion like 125, you would barely see it over the trees, but then again, I don't know who would co-locate.
Mr. Holland,
Yes, sir.
the math's pretty simple. If you can see 50 feet above at 150, you're going to be able to see 75 feet above at 175. So I slightly disagree with your math, sir.
Well, I didn't say you couldn't see 150. You can still
Okay.
see it.
All right.
There's not much difference from that view in terms of 175 and
Right.
150.
So, hang on one sec, please. So, here's my question for you. You are a consultant, and what you do is sell towers and get them approved, and you deal with them day in and day out. Can you share with us some fairly accurate dimensions, the differences between a flush finish, a semi-flush, and a regular array? How far out does it stick from the
If you,
from the
I
pole
think I
itself?
might be able to answer that if you let me
I appreciate it.
go on
Thank
the
you.
phone. Glad I brought it. You can see on the plans of the normal antenna array. We did not include a detail. I may be able to answer that.
There is a rendering on our A6, but I don't think it shows that dimension.
Okay, come on. I don't want to. I don't think I could answer that for you right now. I mean, I could.
Okay, well, so ballpark, in terms of a regular array, is it 10 feet off the pole?
It's approximately that.
Okay. And then semi-flush?
I wish I could find that picture. So I can add a detail of what's in the flush. And I do apologize to seem disheveled. Our attorney, who got the times mixed up, was supposed to be here and present, and he kind of threw me a curveball at the last second.
Commissioner Mulvaney, let's move to, you have a question?
Yeah, according to your scale on our attachment A6, what you're currently showing shows the arrays to be about between 7 and 8 feet off the monopole. So those aren't semi-flush, those are
Right, the
extended.
ones you see on that sheet A2 are normal antenna array.
Based upon the scale.
So you got a scale down here and
Scale
feet.
at the bottom of the
So you
drawing.
just scale it off of here.
It,
Scale,
it looks
you
like
scale.
10 feet to me.
Yeah.
It's like 10.
So,
The scale in the drawing,
Yeah.
1 foot equals 20.
so while you're looking that up, the question I have is, when you say 175, that does not include the 4-foot lightning rods. You'd go to 179?
No, it'd be 170 plus a 5-foot lightning rod is what we presented here.
Okay,
What staff is recommending, 150 total, so the top of the lightning rod.
okay.
We're requesting that if the commission does recommend 150, we'd say it not include the lightning rod, so it'd be 154 or
Plus the
154.
24 inches above the lightning rod for any aircraft avoidance lights if necessary.
Right.
So you would
So,
be at
one-
156. Or at
And you can-
175, you'd be at 181.
No,
Your 170 includes the lightning rod.
Right, it's a 170-foot tower with a 5-foot lightning rod.
Okay. But then you
I know it's a
have
little-
to add an extra 2 feet for your
If-
aircraft avoidance light.
If so
Above
required
your
by the
lightning rod.
airport.
Right.
So you do want the additional feeding outside the 170
So the 170 plus the lightning rod,
and the FFA
then the
requirement.
FAA is 2 feet above that
feet
lightning
above
rod, the highest point on the pole.
Commissioner Spivey?
I have a question. The communication tower, the radio tower that's out there now, does that have a light on the top of it? No,
It doesn't, right?
it does not. They're saying it does not. Do you know how tall that is? That's not for the-
100?
That's the existing one.
Right,
yeah,
that's
that's
existing.
Commissioner Gross?
I never noticed that tower, the communications tower that's there now, until I started looking at where this tower was gonna go.
Yeah.
So, and if the optimum performance of the tower for the, as far as the signal is 170 feet, I don't see us needing to do that, go any lower, or just not do it there.
Well, when we were looking for sites, we looked at Christopher Newport. There's nothing there. There is a monopole, I believe, to the east, but it was too close to another tower where we could co-locate. It would not make sense to co-locate there. So, and when we were searching, we spoke with the museum. We thought that was a good spot, and after discussions with them, sticking it back in their storage, away from the road, we thought was best.
Yeah, I had a chance to tour that property, and it's not bad. You don't need to landscape it.
I agree.
It's,
But
it's
if
really
that
out of the way.
code requires it, we will do it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
So back to Mr. Gross, and I don't disagree. I'm not sure the ground landscaping is absolutely necessary. I realize the code does. But because of where the location is, and because the distance off where people are going to see it, any type of camouflage is going to hide this. It is not going to be a pole with antennas on it, even if it's the internal antennas, because of how far away the human eye can physically see things and the way it's sitting. So if you camouflage it in any way, shape, or form, it's going to blend into the surrounding environment. This is just opposite of what the surrounding environment currently exists as. And I just think that, we talked about this when we did the Fort Eustis one, is the fact that we've got to somehow set a standard going forward, because we're going to get more cell towers, because we need to have more communication, and how do we make them as invisible as possible, or do we want a city full of a bunch of cell towers placed everywhere, and that's what your visual line of sight's gonna see when we're traveling down, so we can talk on our cell phones.
I have a question in looking at this and reviewing, I'm sorry I didn't ask this, looking at making a change or a recommendation to amend for the landscaping, would that be an issue for us?
In terms of the landscaping at the base?
Yes.
You're talking about? I believe the code is fairly clear, and we can read you the section. I'm sorry, I didn't
Yes,
switch
that's why,
to that.
that's why I asked, yes.
Okay, go ahead, Lynn.
Thank you.
There is a landscaping requirement in
Do we have
subsection,
any- Do we have any leeway there? That's what.
yeah, and that's what I'm gonna share with you. Under 45-523, 1D1, certain landscaping is required, but under subsection 2 of D, it does say that, that there's some leeway. It says, in lieu of the above requirements, in special cases, including stealth applications, the applicant may prepare an alternate landscape plan and specifications for landscape and screening, including plantings, fences, walls, buildings, topography, et cetera, to screen the tower. And then it talks later about just the director of planning approving this alternate arrangement. So there is some leeway to the requirement, which is in another section, which is a row of evergreen trees at least 8 feet in height shall be planted and maintained on 10-foot centers, completely surrounding the tower equipment. So there is some leeway to that requirement, which would include, it says,
Existing trees.
fences, walls, other topography, and that it would be approved by the Director of Planning.
Okay. And so I just want to make sure that I'm clear in my thinking. So in screening, it doesn't say that the screening has to be on the ground. We can apply the screening to the actual pole or screening in another form. Is there
Well,
any-
it does not specify that. It just says, for landscaping and screening, including plantings, fences, walls, building, topography. You absolutely have the leeway to talk about a stealth
Stealth, right.
application, but this is talking about screening of the equipment
Okay.
at the base of the tower.
And
For the
At the
ground
base
only.
of, yeah, at the base of
that
the tower.
section of the code, I did find it, thank you, Lynn, does say where existing trees abut the compound but are located within the lease area, such trees can be maintained and the evergreen trees shall be used as infill. So it's obvious there's, that screening that we're talking about is for the ground.
Right.
You can use, when the applicant, if this is approved by city council, and the applicant submits a site plan, we would ask for a tree survey that would help us understand what's there. And then we can go from that point to see what infill may be needed, or if they choose to do a different type of screening material, that would have to be approved by the Director of Planning.
So, right now, we have a recommended approval for, 150-foot tower. Is that right? Or 50?
It's 150 foot,
100
including the
Antenna.
antenna.
No, it does not. The 150 does not include the 4-foot antenna.
It-
Correct?
It does in the
does.
staff report.
In the staff report, it does.
We're requesting 150, not including
He's requesting not.
the
But
lighting.
you
staff.
want 175 feet. So if we have this conditional use permit, we can either approve it or deny it based on the conditions. And I don't know. I mean, how do we change conditions if we decide we don't want 150, we want 175?
We put
You
it
just
in-
make a motion to change the condition.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Right.
I did find a picture of semi-flush. This was a T-Mobile tower that we got approved in Hampton. If you'd like to see it, I know it's not the, I don't know.
I'd
if-
like to see it.
Okay.
Can we get some assistance from Saul? Can we get that on the computer? Can we probably pull it up on the internet?
And would you get it?
You can't, we
We-
don't have a way to print it.
Our landscape, can we?
We can see if the image can be seen on Elmo. That's all we can do at this moment.
I mean, that would help. If not, then we can, I guess, pass it around through the
my phone.
commissioners here. We can bring it forward and just pass it around. Let's-
Pass this phone around.
Yeah, if it's okay
Make sure
with Mr. Holland.
Yes, sir.
We could pass your
You
phone
may
around.
pass
if
my
it's
phone
okay-
around.
Yeah, if it's okay with you.
Closing the hearing.
Yeah,
Let's just.
We would
let's just-
definitely like to view it.
What?
just don't go through my text messages or emails
We
or
won't read your text messages. We just
So-
trying.
Mr. Holland, this is semi-flush,
semi-flush. For a tower, we got approved in Hampton recently.
okay? We don't
And it
have
doesn't have
we don't
dimensions,
have a
but
dimension,
it's-
but it's
It's
probably
not as
3,
wide
4,
as-
5 feet off.
Okay, semi-flush. Okay, that's not bad. But that's, even with semi-flush, still doesn't do anything about the height.
Right.
Correct.
It just makes that
Right.
less intrusive
Less
up at
intrusive
top.
from the top.
Look at the water tower.
I'm focusing, I'm here at the height. And
Look at that one.
Like I said, the improvement,
Oh, he's got it.
So, Mr. Chairman, it seems like, from what I've heard so far, we have basically two issues that are being discussed, and one is the height of the tower, and one is whether it is to be camouflaged or not. Is that correct?
I believe we have 3.
I think we have 3.
3?
Yeah, we don't know whether or not it's gonna need to be lighted.
Correct.
Because
And
of the
without the
air.
airport, without the FAA submitting their recommendations, we have no clue whether or not, so it's hard to take a 150 or even 175 and say, okay, we can approve this, and then there's gonna be a red beacon on top of this thing that. Correct. I assure you, everybody living in the area is not gonna be overly happy with.
Correct.
Ask a question. So if you then have the pole disguised as a tree and then it has a blinking light on top of it, how does that help it blend into the surroundings? I mean, that's just more of a.
Oh, Christmas tree.
I'm serious. I mean, we're into semantics of disguising it, but then not knowing if it's going to have a light on it. I think if you have a tree with a light on it, it's going to look even more. I mean, we're
things all over.
I just think it's a pole. We know it's a pole. And
My thought is, if the FAA comes back and says that there's no light, then it drives what our recommendations could be, and we could ask for the stealth. If the FAA comes back and says there has to be a light, and there is a way to do the light in a stealthy manner, but yes, it's gonna be visible, then it kind of changes my thought process to say, then, let's go to the 150 tower. The FAA says at 150, there's no light. Then, but at 175, there will be. That gives us those two components of whether or not it's gonna be a lighted tower, so we can make the recommendations. Staff has said there's 150. If there's no light, we can stealth it, then that gives us another avenue to say, just so you know, my recommendation is gonna be for deferral until the FAA comes in and tells us what the conditions for the tower's gonna be.
How tall are the other towers, the trees, the pine trees, at Riverview and at Hydenwood?
I truly don't recall.
I don't either.
I mean, I think it was about 150 the one at Hydenwood, at the Hydenwood
A
pool.
Riverview? Of course, they may not be in a flight path, so it may not
Yeah,
matter.
I will say that there are two towers relatively close to this on Warwick Boulevard, just south of this location. One is next to the Lidl, next to the Verizon building, that has no light on it. And then there's one behind the Autobell gas station, I don't remember what the gas station's called, also on Warwick Boulevard, and that one does not have a light on it either. I don't think this is in the flight path, which is probably why we didn't hear from them.
Okay, good.
But I can't assertively say no.
Okay.
Well, the concern lies more for the Riverside helipad than it does for the airport.
Right,
What?
Riverside Hospital.
Yeah. Okay, to kind of move through, thank you, Mr. Holland. We have one more card on this case. And I'd like to call Mr. Gary Hayward to the podium, please. Thank you, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Derry Haywood, and I live 63 Lakeside Drive, which is across the street from the tower, or proposed tower. And I have been talking to planning staff. I have a couple concerns. The first is that no one from the tower company reached out to the neighborhood to get us involved in the process. My first hear of it was the staff notice, and so I reached out to Saul, right? Okay. And we talked about it, and I told him my concerns as far as the height and everything, and when he said they were looking to admit it to 150, I was on board with that. And I was not going to speak until it seems like that we didn't have anybody else from the neighborhood here. So my concern is the height of it. I don't want to look out my window and see my 175-foot tower to ruin that pristine view that you spoke of, Commissioner Mulvey. Okay. Questions?
Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Commissioner Fox.
You think the 25-foot difference would mean a real impediment to your view?
I think it would, and I don't think it's worth whether it's the cost of the cell phone company making more money.
What about
in my view.
the idea that with more height, you get more co-locators, and then you don't have to build as many towers?
Well, unless you're going to build it, as the gentleman from the tower company said, they want to build it there because of it's not, the other location was going to be close to another tower. So if you put a 150-foot tower in my neighborhood, I'm pretty sure you're not going to put another one in my neighborhood because they don't want them that close together, if I'm correct from what I heard.
So I'm just curious,
Uh-huh.
Let's say a 150-foot tower is coming your way. Would you prefer just to have a tower with a average width array, Or would you prefer to have it all looking like a tree?
Nice tree.
And the tree may be 50 foot taller than any other tree?
Well, the tree,
neighborhood.
I see the tree. I have some friends live further back in the neighborhood in Riverside, and the tree off of Hayden Boulevard, it's not attractive. Just looks like a big giant palm tree in the wintertime, so.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you for your input.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Gross?
When they did the balloon test, did you happen to notice it?
No, because they didn't notify anyone. I mean, they could have did the balloon test at 9 o'clock in the morning, the whole neighborhood's gone to work.
I don't know how long the test was for.
I don't know either. That's my point.
Commissioner?
Thank you.
Deary, I have a question.
Sure.
Can you see the radio tower from your house?
No, because I don't know where it is. But I can see the museum and the parking lots and lights and everything like that. If you ever go to the museum, that last road before you go up to the museum drive is Lakeside right there. And I'm facing the museum, so I'm relatively close.
I wonder how many are, Hydenwood is how far away from the site? A mile and a half?
Yeah.
Maybe 2 miles tops.
And how many are located at Hydenwood on that tower? So we could be forced to build another one a mile and a half away
Okay.
if this one's not tall enough. And I understand your concern.
Okay. No other questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Having no other cards in this matter, now close the public hearing session for this application. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I
Commissioner
move
Mulvaney.
that the planning commission defer conditional use permit 2019-0001 for several reasons. I'd like to see the FAA report. I'd like the communications people to reach out to the neighboring community, give them an opportunity to review the poll. And I'd like to understand that we have, without having to modify, whether we're going to live with the 175 or the 150 foot, which would be 154 at the applicant's request.
I agree, I second that deferral, but I would also like to say, I'd like to hear more about what kind of stealth tower options, other than the tall pine tree, are available. If we could have some input on that.
My motion's so amended.
Okay. Before we move, I do have a question for our attorney on this. As we heard the proposed motion and then the second comment by Commissioner Fox with that, can that be added to it based on how it was read? I think there's two different pieces there that we're concerned with. Height, the FAA report, and also the considerations for the stealth option.
And the community.
And the community. So that'd be 4 additional pieces.
Mr. Mulvaney amended his motion to include that. I don't see a problem with it.
Okay. All right. So I just want to make sure we didn't have to go back around and say anything, have him repeat it since he amended it.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
No,
Okay.
It was a friendly amendment. He's agreed to it.
Goodness. Thank you.
I think we are all friendly. We just want to make sure that we are doing things,
Generally speaking, yes.
conducting business in the proper manner. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure, no problem.
Well, we have a motion.
I would like to second it.
Thank you.
Just because I feel there would be some confusion, and we wouldn't get the best vote possible if we don't defer it
Right.
I agree.
because of the different options and ideas that have come up.
Thank you. With that being said, Melissa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Mulvaney,
4.
Commissioner Carpenter,
4.
Commissioner Stodgel,
4.
Commissioner Whitcamp,
4.
Commissioner Willis,
4.
Commissioner Gross,
4.
Commissioner Fox,
4.
Commissioner Simmons.
4.
Motion unanimous, 8-0.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners. I do believe that this was and will be a great, valuable piece for us. We just need to get it right for the city. And thank you, commissioners, for all your input on this matter. We'll now move to our next session, our executive secretary report.
Good afternoon. As you know, or have heard, we are talking about communication towers. And on February 26th, City Council approved the zoning text amendment ZT 2018-008 that amended definitions and requirements for communication towers 50 feet and greater, 50 feet, small cell, and wireless facilities. On March 20th, you will have a public meeting that will include a special exception to increase the floor area of an accessory structure on a 2.56 acre parcel at 20 Miller Road.
What is that?
What is, the special exception?
No, what building is it?
It's a single-family house, and they have an accessory structure that is going to increase the floor area.
Okay, cool.
And you'll hear more about that and get a staff report in about a week. You also are wondering where our fearless leader is. Ms. Sheila McAllister is the Director of Planning and typically would give you this report, and she is at our CNI HUD visit, which is today, and we wish them all Godspeed and wish the best for our city. We're excited, and I know they've all been working very hard and diligently on this proposal, and we hope to hear some good, exciting news soon.
Yes.
Final note is that the Denby-Warwick Area Plan will have a community meeting on March 21st at 6 p.m. at the Denby Community Center. At that time, there'll be a presentation of the draft vision, goals, and strategies of the plan, along with some design charrette items that were discussed at the last community meeting and will be brought forward to get some additional community feedback. So put that on our calendars, and
Can we
whoever
make
can be
sure
there.
that our commissioners get a reminder of that on the email?
Sure.
Thank you, Melissa.
And that concludes our report.
Thank you. I think you did a wonderful job. Any committee reports?
Regulations Committee has not met since we last met, so I do not have anything new.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other committee reports? Any unfinished business? Any new business? Meeting adjourned.
Very good.